In Java, exceptions are handled by Java runtime system. That means when you are executing a program, if there is some error, then that will be handled by the Java runtime system. What is an exception? Exception is an abnormal condition that arises in a code sequence at runtime. That means runtime, where if there is an abnormal condition arises, then uh, that is called an exception. Exception is a runtime error. When an exceptional condition arises, an object representing that exception is created and thrown in the method that causes the error. Okay, exception is caught and processed. That means whenever there is an error, that error is thrown by the Java runtime system, and there should be an exception handler to catch it and do the necessary things what the system has to handle that. So when we are dealing with exception handling, these are the keywords you should always keep in mind: try, catch, throw, throws, and finally. Try, catch, throw, throws, and finally. Now exception handling types. So exception handlers are, as you know, in Java everything uh, is a subclass of object class, and here all exception types are subclasses of built-in class throwable. Throwable. Throwable is the superclass of all exception handlers, throwable, and throwable has two main subclasses which are exception and error. Exception is for exception handling. Error is for exceptions that are not caught under normal circumstances. That means almost all exceptions are caught by exception handlers, which is pointed to by exception class, and error means exceptions that are not caught under normal circumstances. They are coming under this error subclass, and runtime exception is an important subclass of exception. Now this is an example of an exception which is by uh, generated by the Java runtime system. For example, here we have a class execc0 and public static, that means the main program, and here we have defined an integer d to be 0, and now we are trying to initialize the integer variable as 42 divided by d. As d is 0, 0, 42 divided by 0 is division by 0 is not defined, or it's an exception. That means divide by 0 exception. So here in this program there is no facility to catch that exception. So what happens is, it is the program terminates the execution of the program. Okay, that means throws the exception and terminates the program. That means once this a is equal to 42 by d is executed, then automatically the runtime system generates error, and that error or that exception is thrown, and that is not, it is not caught and not handled. What will happen then? The Java runtime system terminates the execution of the program. Okay, so there must be a facility for catching the exception. That means once an error or exception is generated, that has to be caught and dealt. Okay, so for that we are going to use try catch facility. Try catch, using try and catch. In that program I am going to have a try catch facility I have provided here. At the previous one, here in the public static void main we have two statements, int d equal to 0 and int a is equal to 42 divided by d. Now those two statements I'm going to put in a try statement, and for documentation facility or um, for printing system for printing this will not be printed. I'm going to have a system.out.println statement. That means when that exception is thrown, or when that exception is thrown, the the statements after that, that means when you are uh, when you are executing this program, when int a is equal to 42 by d is executed, what will happen? It will uh, it will throw the exception. Then after that, the system.out.println, that statement won't be executed. Why? Int a is equal to 42 by d, when that is executed, the exception is thrown, and that is caught by the arithmetic exception handler. Okay, that means in a try block, you are going to add some statements, and when whenever an exception is thrown by a particular statement, then after that the remaining statement of the strike block will not be executed, and uh, it is the thrown exception will be caught by an exception handler, and if it is an arithmetic exception in this case, then it will print system.out.println division by 0. That means here arithmetic, that means catch arithmetic expression exception e means if it is an arithmetic exception. That means if 42 by d is generating, that exception is of type arithmetic expression, then only that will be caught, otherwise it will terminate. Okay, so when this program is executed, by what will happen? When int a is equal to 42 divided by d is executed, an exception is thrown, and that is an arithmetic exception. As it is an arithmetic exception, then that will be caught by this caught block, and definitely division by 0 is printed. And once that arithmetic exception is dealt with, then the remaining statements definitely will be executed. That means the termination of the program is not done. Okay, then definitely after each after catch statement, that statement also will be printed. Okay, now multiple catch clauses. Here, see, in the try block you have int a is equal to 0, int b is equal to 42 divided by a, int c, that means c is an array, and that is an array which is having only a single element 1, and c of 42 is equal to 99. That means here 4 statements are there, those are inside a try block, and catch arithmetic expression exception e, that is a catch block. Another catch block is array index out of bound exception e. Okay, then suppose int a equals 0, int b is equal to 42 divided by a, what will happen? When as the value of int a is 0, definitely 42 divided by a will generate an arithmetic expression exception. So after that it won't be executed. Int 42 divided by a, b is equal to 42 divided by a, that when that is executed, what will happen? As the value of a is 0, it will generate an exception, and it is of type arithmetic exception, and that is called by the first catch block, and division by 0, that will be printed. And after that, after the set of catch statements, uh, after try catch blocks, that will also be printed. That means division by 0 by plus e means that exception also will be printed. And after that, after try catch blocks, that message also is printed. Okay, now suppose that the value of a is equal to 1. Suppose that the value of a is in the try block, suppose that the first statement int a is equal to 1, int a is equal to 1, then what will happen? A is equal to 1, then int b is equal to 42 divided by 1, no problem. Now int c is equal to 1 means now you are going to define an array which is having a single element and it is initialized as 1. And when c is equal to 4, c of 42, that means c is having only a single element, and c of 42, that means array index is out of bounds. That means c of 42, c of 0 is possible, c of 1 is not possible, 2 is not possible. Why? We have only a single element in the array and it is out of bounds, c of 42. That means when c of 42 is equal to 99, that instruction is executed. What will happen? It will generate an array index out of bound exception, and when that exception is generated, what will happen? That exception is thrown, and that block cannot be caught by catch arithmetic. As it is not an arithmetic expression, that catch block uh, cannot receive or catch that exception. Second catch block is catch arithmetic index out of bound exception. That means that will be caught by that catch block. Okay, in that case, what will happen? It will print array index out of bounds, array index OOB plus that exception will be um, generated, and after that, after try catch blocks, that will also be printed. That means for a single try block you can have multiple catch clauses. That means um, depending on the type of exception generated, we can have multiple catch statements. Okay, then we are going to discuss nested try statements. That means in a try block, you can have inside a try block you can have another try block, and inside that another try block you can have. Here this is an example. When you go through this example, you will be thorough with this concept. Try statement 1, statement 2, those two are in the outer try, and statement 3 and 4 are in the second try, and statement 5 and 6 are in the third try. Okay, so suppose that inside this uh, third one, which is statement 5 and statement 6, in the innermost try block you have statement 5 and statement 6. Okay, suppose that when you are executing statement 5, suppose that it is generating an exception, and if that exception is generated, then the inner catch block is exception E2. So it is suppose that that block is, that means uh, state when you are executing this statement 5, it is throwing an exception, and the catch block, which is exception E2, that will check whether the exception generated by statement 5 matches exception E2. If it is not matched, what will it do? Then the outer catch is exception E1, and that will be compared, and if that also does not match, then what will happen? Exception E3, the outermost uh, exception is compared, and if there is a match, that body of that catch statement will be executed, and if the exception generated by statement 5 does not match all of the three catches, then automatically the program will generate, or the exception handling mechanism of Java will handle that and terminate the program. That means if you have a try catch inside another try, then if the innermost try block generates an exception, then that exception is compared with the block of catch block of that try. If it does not match, then what will happen? then it will compare the next outer catch block and next outer catch block, etc. That means that is the way you are going to do that. Okay, so this is, and will the this is another example, that means class nesting demo. And you have public static void main string, that means main try block starts with try block 2, then try block 3 is there, and in the innermost you have try int array 1 2 3 4 system dot an array of 10 catch arithmetic exception. That means here, see, in the innermost try, that means int arr of array equal to 1 2 3 4 means you have defined an integer array which is having only 4 elements 1 2 3 and 4, and after that you are trying to print array arr of 10. That means it will generate an array out of bound exception. It will actually generate an array out of bound exception. But see, the innermost catch statement is catching only arithmetic exception. That means uh, system dot out dot println of arr10, that will generate an array index out of bound exception. But that the catch block of that try is having only arithmetic exception, so the index out of bound exception and arithmetic exception does not match. So in that case it will go to the next outer one, which is again arithmetic exception, uh, that also does not match. Then it will come to the next one, which is again arithmetic exception E3, that also doesn't match. Then finally the last catch statement is array index out of bound exception. Then automatically that will be those two matches, and in that case it will print index out of bounds exception and handled in main try block, and that's all. That means if you have multiple try try catch blocks, the innermost one, suppose that the suppose that an inner try block generates an exception, then it will compare uh, that exception with its catch block, then outer catch block, then outer catch block, and so on. That means when it sees a match, when there is a match, then that exception handler will do the job. That's all.